Welcome to Global Connections on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. Today, we'll talk about Putin's hybrid war in Europe, the emerging right-wing drift. Our guest for this show is Roopmati Khandekar, geopolitical analyst. Welcome to the show, Roopmati.
Aloha, Jay. Thank you for having me on your show. Always my pleasure.
So what's going on in Europe these days? There seems to be a lot of news. It sounds like a lot of the countries in Europe are in a state of disarray. Would you agree?
Right, Jay. And the question that we are going to discuss today is Russia, headed by Vladimir Putin, playing with European voters' mind? Is he indulging in pragmatic manipulation of European voters? So, Jay, it's a very dicey topic that we get into, because Russia denies meddling officially in any of these elections, but reality proves otherwise. Far right parties in Europe are perceived by Moscow as a centrifugal force, which erode European cohesiveness, and then they strengthen Russia's ability to be a regional hegemon. So that is the reason why Russia caters to these right-wing uh, uh, parties. And then, if you come to it, Russia, to influence the European minds, uses these narratives which they have already tested on the Russian electorate. So you can see a trend in these far right parties that, for example, during its war on Ukraine, Russia ramped up its messaging on against the LGBTQ, that is the gay rights in Moscow, and they highlighted the traditional conservative family values, because they portrayed as gay rights being the result of liberal Western ideology. So they had a very aggressive stance towards this to demarcate what was gay and what was right. So they put gay into wrong. And Jay, one other narrative that they put up was that the Ukraine war, the Russian sanctions, was a self goal by Europe. So because of this Ukraine war, energy costs and cost of living has increased in Europe, and major international institutions are dominated by the Western liberal philosophy, and whatever decisions they take are become law as they desire. So Europe has to be Eurocentric, but actually it's Russia guiding their policies. And Jay, they also said that they also have through these far right parties have propagated the point that the Russian invasion was a result of the Western provocation of Russia, and if you persistently defend Ukraine, is going to lead to a nuclear war, of which Europe is going to be the first line of attack. So you see, they're playing on fears, they're playing on economics, all these things at one time, and that makes these far right parties feel very close to heart for people, because it's everyday life that they're dealing in. And so, Jay, when the US Congress approves a $60 billion aid to Europe, and then UK, France, Germany give permission to Ukraine to use their weapons on Russian soil, what happens? The fears are highlighted. We had a program a few weeks back where we discussed how Europe was shivering. Only Kiev consulate was emptied by the US, but entire Europe was feeling that they are in the Ukraine war, they are in the line of attack of Russia. And these European elections are now presenting a new opportunity every time to Russia to play on these fears of Europe. So, mainly in this, the central landlocked European countries, which stretch, they have a Russophilic population. That means they have a vested interest in Russian oil and gas. And so their inclination towards Russia is more favorable than the others. And economically, the recession after the pandemic and the intrusive migrations have given these far right parties a huge lift in all the elections across Europe. So the working class disillusionment with the EU's ability to improve economic condition, the cons of the open Schengen border, the authoritarian anti-immigration, anti-globalist, Eurosceptic populist parties have thrived because of this.
Well, let's go country by country.
Yeah.
Some countries are more affected than others, but I would say in all of the major countries of Western Europe, you can see the impressions of Putin's actions. I guess the first question is, what kinds of things does he do? We know he does propaganda. We know he tries to get puppet officials to run for office. We know he tries to manipulate the balance in the legislatures. We know he does what he can to move things to the right, which, as you say, is in his support, especially with regard to the Ukraine issue. But it's more than that, because he is having a detrimental effect on all the governments that he touches. So what kinds of things is he doing in the hybrid war he is conducting against Western Europe?
Jay, besides these narratives that Russia sets in for these right-wing parties, it is all pro-Russia propaganda. If you see, the manifestos give pro-Russia inclinations. Secondly, they are funded by Russia in a very open manner. They have media houses which are funded openly by the Russian oligarchs, and so many media houses like Voice of Europe and all have shut down because they have this link with Russia. And Jay, if we go country by country, say let's start with the Netherlands. The Party for Freedom in 2010 was the third largest. In 2017, it became the second, and in 2023, its leader Geert Wilders is now leading the coalition. So it was a steady progress. Within 13 years, a party comes into power. Secondly, in Germany, the Alternative for Germany, AFD, won seats in a series of state legislatures beginning in 2014, and now 12.6% of the vote to enter federal government in 2017. In Finland, you have the Finns party, which was formerly known as the True Finns, and they took 17% of the vote, 17.7% of the vote in 2015, and they have now ruled as coalition partners for 2 years, Jay. The Swedish Democrats became the country's second largest party in 2022. In Italy, we have Meloni having the coalition power. In France, you have the National Front steadily increasing its vote share in the past three presidential elections. But Jay, I would like to discuss the case of Austria in detail, because Jörg Haider, the Freedom Party of Austria, the FPO, it was placed second in the 1999 general elections, and they entered into a coalition with the third placed center-right Austrian People's Party. So this was the first entry of a hardliner party in government since the Second World War, and it shocked everybody in Europe. So now the FPO outpolls everyone else at 29% of the vote share, and it leads a platform which is totally Russia friendly and includes continuing importing oil and gas 110% from Russia. So Austrian ultra-conservatism and Russophilic feelings run across party lines in Austria, Jay. And they also have a state contract for delivery of Russian oil and gas, which stretches right up to 2040, Jay. So no publicity, no transparency, no debate to the opposition on this contract that is being given. And Russia is called a strategic partner by Austria. So you have the FPO signing a secret agreement with the United Russia Party in 2016, and at the same time, Jay, an agreement with the Northern League in Italy, Jay, with the United Russia Party. So these people have entered into agreements with Russia directly, and what do they say? That they want experience sharing, they want party building, organization work, youth policy, economic development, and legislative activity. That's what they want to share. But in reality, it is different, Jay. They want to influence and capture European electorate.
Maybe this is organic. Maybe these people really feel that Russia is right, and indeed it is. I mean, it's to the right. And maybe this is an ordinary, normal, organic process rather than manipulation. Can we be sure? What is the evidence out there that Russia is affirmatively trying to change these governments, to move these governments to the right, and to move public opinion to the right? What's the evidence of it?
Jay, really, they are playing on the fears, and they are enriching themselves on the weaknesses of the European electorate. Now, economic problems due to a war, which is right, the proximity of the war to Europe, the dependence on Russian oil and gas, all this is going to cause economic hardships. And when it hurts your pocket, if somebody tells you this is the reason why it's hurting your pocket, and maybe we can solve it if we have a better government in place, that's going to lure the voters, rather than somebody telling them that the political jingoism that Russia is invading Europe, Ukraine, that does not matter when it's taking out a few extra euros from your pocket. You want to preserve your income, you want to lower your cost of living, you want to have a better lifestyle, you want to have a more secure future. So all these are very, what do you say, like the word you use, organic voter ambitions that they have during the elections. And the Russian media or Russian influence is very smart in playing this and bringing a sympathetic side towards Russia in this. That Russia didn't do this. It happened because Russia was provoked to do it.
Well, I think it's very interesting that there's a definable parallel between those nationalist, isolationist, anti-migrant ideologies that are rising in Europe and changing in Europe. I mean, Angela Merkel, she was very tolerant of migrants, and all these movements are really against migrants. And it's the same thing in the U.S., isn't it? You could run a parallel. And so I think what he's trying to do is exacerbate this, and he's
Mm.
spending a lot of money and capital in one way or another to try to insinuate these governments with politicians who are sympathetic to him. And we don't know the half of it. I'm sure that there are Russian agents all over Europe. We know there are Russian agents in UK. We know that. And they are spreading some money around, spreading propaganda around, doing everything they can do. This is a non-kinetic hybrid war. But there's a kinetic side to it too. I was telling you there was an article in the Polish in the I guess in the Polish newspapers reported by BBC,
Mm.
reporting that there was a series of parcel fires targeting courier companies in Poland, Germany, and the UK. And these were found to be dry runs aimed at sabotaging flights to the US and Canada. And Polish prosecutors have, in fact, revealed that 4 people were arrested and that European authorities are investigating the incidents. Now, that's not really hybrid. I mean, it's not non-kinetic. It's kind of kinetic when they do sabotage and put explosives in carriers. So I think this is a all points kind of effort by Russia in every way possible, between the propaganda, the threats, which are pretty serious when you're talking about nuclear threats. That memorandum that he wrote not 2 weeks ago, saying that if you help Ukraine attack Russia, then you are our enemy and we will attack you. And that includes every country in NATO. It includes the US too. All these things taken together, you connect the dots, and what you get is that Putin is involved in an all points war. It goes hybrid, it goes non kinetic, and it also goes kinetic. He's doing everything he can. And I guess it's cheaper than putting troops on the battlefield. Koreans are not doing that well. The North Koreans are not doing that well. He's losing his ability to recruit new soldiers. The sanctions are having an effect on his ability to buy arms. At the same time, the economy of a lot of these European countries is suffering from primarily two factors, as I understand it. Number one is, yes, they're dependent on Russia. Yes, they're dependent on Russian oil and gas, but he's raising the prices. He's raising the prices. And so they have to dig deeper in their pockets to pay him for the oil and gas. And that money goes to his efforts to undermine them. The second thing is that they were doing manufacturing, especially Germany, and competing with China. But China is actually taking Germany's lunch. And China is exporting to Europe, and the countries of Europe are not exporting to China. So what you have is the export economy of Western Europe is on a decline, where China is on the rise in Western Europe. So all these things taken together, undermine the European economy. They undermine the stability. We could go country by country and demonstrate that of each of these parliamentary democracies. And what's happening is that these countries are being destabilized, and their resolve and ability to help Ukraine is being undermined. And I think Putin is largely responsible for that. It does point out, doesn't it, that this whole notion of parliamentary coalitions doesn't work when somebody is trying to undermine your coalition. And that is exactly what's happening. These right-wing organizations, which are so heavily influenced by Russia, they're a game changer in coalition politics. And this is part of his hybrid war. The question is, what can they do? You can prosecute the people who were involved in the sabotage I just mentioned. The press can beat off his propaganda. I'm not sure they're successful at that in Western Europe as here. Remember, Putin was actively involved in this election of Trump a few weeks ago. It was not just the United States public opinion generated internally. It was him sending propaganda. And so the question is, what do you do against a guy who understands and can be involved in your parliamentary democracy, can be involved in the formation of public opinion in a given country? What can you do to stop him? Is there any way to stop him?
Jay, right now there seems to be no way to stop him, because we did not have this kind of coalition politics like you mentioned in Europe. It was one stable party versus the other. Now, coalition politics is an altogether different game, Jay. There is so much of appeasement politics that comes in, and they have such far-reaching wants or demands from the government that it destabilizes the working of the government. There is no decision made very emphatically in this type of governments. There is always the fear of the coalition support being removed and the government falling down. So Russia has played a very huge hand in this kind of what do you say, planting coalition politics in Europe in a big way. And these parties, right-wing parties, they promise you the world, and because they are small, they can be easily funded by Russia. And when they fund, they have a say in these uh, uh, policies of a country. Like, see the case of Austria, which I mentioned. It kept on increasing till it reached the majority, and then it calls Russia a strategic partner. So it will not change its inclination to Russia in any circumstance. So that's what Putin aims for, that this party will rise ahead. And Jay, to understand the larger picture, uh, they want to be the hegemon or the supreme power in uh, Eurasia. Russia never considers itself a part of Asia. It is right across the map of Asia, but it always inclines towards Europe. You call China, India part of Asia, but you never say Russia, India, China, because they're all on one side of Russia, of Asia. They're never in Europe. But Russia considers itself like the leader of this European pack. It wants to come into the Western European zone and dominate. That is where we see the Russian vandalism coming very covertly and overtly also right now.
Yeah,
Please
that's true.
succeed.
That's what some of these episodes of violence, we don't know for sure, but they sure sound like something that Putin set up. But going through the list, Italy recently, Maloney, has indicated that Italy has to stay close with Putin because that Putin is an important person. Likewise, she said, and we need to discuss this, Italy has to stay close to Trump. Trump and Putin, they're running a parallel. France is in, as I said, disarray before, and that's certainly so. They didn't have a government for several weeks, and it's not clear what the coalition means. Macron has had to give up some authority as president, and we'll see what happens. But Marine Le Pen is in the wings, and she is a pro-Russian, we know, and the problem there is, with any other protests, and the agricultural community, the farmers are protesting now yet again. So France is the land of protests, and these protests so easily spill over into this very issue about supporting Russia. And then Poland is concerned for its future, but Poland is under attack, and Poland is it's fighting back in its own way, but it is right there on the border, and I think all of the Baltics are exposed, and they are very concerned, but I'm not sure what they can do. The point is that they feel the hot breath of Vladimir Putin on their neck, and it's happening all over town. Hungary recently made a statement. I guess that's Viktor Orban, and Slovakia next door made a statement supporting the pro-Russian group that's trying to take over in Georgia, and that what that means is they're working for Putin to try to develop that huge block that he is building. So we may say that the sanctions are supposed to slow him down, but they haven't really done that. We may say that the efforts of Western Europe and the U.S. under the Biden administration should have slowed him down in his war against Ukraine, but I'm not so sure we can say that either. And right now, Putin is making progress in eastern Ukraine. So the question I put to you, which is really important, is how does this all move ahead or backward or to the side on January 20th? Trump has said he doesn't really care much about Ukraine and would force a peace agreement on Ukraine. He's also made it clear that Putin is his friend. So what will happen, do you think, on January 20th with regard to this move to this right? What will happen with regard to this move to the right in Europe? What will happen to Putin's efforts to undermine Western Europe politically and economically?
Jay, earlier the nations of Western Europe had to choose between the US and Russia. Well, on January 20, after January 20, like you said, Trump's far-reaching statements have made it clear that the European countries do not have to choose. Leaders like Melanie can have Trump and Putin both together at the same time. There is no animosity between them. They don't have to choose their leaders. All are going to be portrayed as one umbrella that they can fall under. And Europe, like we have mentioned before, Europe needs your American security under the NATO agreement for its protection, but it fears Russia. So it's in such a catch-22 situation that now Trump doesn't bother about NATO. So they have to keep Russia very happy. And so, Jay, they are like, what do you say? Those They are toothless in this entire duel, Jay, and they just keep on taking sides. They have no concrete say. We have discussed this many a times that the EU, even when it came together as a bloc, they don't have those defining moments in international history to take decisions, to take sides, to take stands, to be a coalition. If Ukraine is part of Europe, irrespective of NATO, they should have come and protected it, because they, like you always say, it would be next aggression of Putin, who can be any country in Europe. So to understand that and to act on that, they fall short of this. So for Europe to be against Putin is a very now far-fetched reality, because you're seeing all these parties who are pro-Putin come into power, and they have their voices heard more emphatically than the liberal parties which were in power. So that's why we are taking notice of these uh, rise of these right-wing parties.
Well, let's assume that Trump, announces on January 20th that he has cut a deal with Putin. He's not going to tell us. He's not going to be transparent about it. He'll just announce that he's cut a deal. Who knows when he made that deal? Um, and and um, and then, in fact, he will put the boots to NATO, but not supporting NATO. He will put the boots to Western Europe by not supporting it, and he will, essentially give the store up to Putin. Now, the question then, in a larger sense, is what does Putin do? He would be very encouraged by Trump's moves along those lines. He would be very encouraged by a deal which, gives him a good part of Ukraine and requires that Ukraine not join NATO, and sort of undermines NATO, the EU, and Western Europe, and for that matter, the influence, if any, is left by then of the United States in Western Europe. What does Putin do in that moment? This is a great opportunity for him. What does he do?
Jay, he is a very patient man, because what happened after last a couple of weeks back, when Biden allowed the use of long range missiles, if this was the first year of the Biden administration, Putin's reaction would have been very different from what it was. He is waiting out till January 20th, because he sees a ally in Trump coming up, and he is dismissing Biden and whiling away time until January 20th. Just imagine if this decision had come at the beginning of the war, he would have given a very befitting, or a very retaliatory attack on Ukraine. He has just played it low, Jay. And this shows that Russia is playing war tactics at its best, Jay. He is he's really commanding them with not only diplomacy, but the war tactics have not gone. When you're not at the best of your ability, or when you want to avoid unnecessary confrontation, he is playing it down. So that's what happened in this entire episode, Jay. That Putin has not aggravated himself, or to such an extent that he would give tit for tat for Ukraine's moves, Jay.
It strikes me that as and when we reach that inflection point, January 20th, there will be more. Putin is not going to stop his hybrid war on January 20th. He'll be encouraged to continue it. And so I think we can say that between now and then, he's going to make increasing efforts with the countries of Europe to undermine them politically and economically. And after January 20th, he'll continue that, because it falls in line with his efforts to be the hegemon. Don't you agree? This is only beginning.
You're so right about this, Jay. This is just the beginning. And he knows he's going to have a better playing field after January 20th. And that's what he is really waiting for, the kind of money that will cut for Ukraine's weapons and defense will be phenomenal, Jay. Because when Trump is not ready to fund NATO and the United Nations, why is he going to fund Ukraine? He's not going. He's going to let it be. And uh, the concept of Putin to aggress and to trespass and to overtake and to control the Ukrainian land will know no limits, because there will be no restricting power on him. And European nations will fall into line with Putin's words, because Jay, he controls them with the biggest power, that is oil and gas. So he used that supply to such a extent that these people did not have any grit in this Ukraine-Russia war. They did not have any diplomatic efforts. They did not have any military efforts. It was just a kind of push behind Ukraine as part of the NATO. But nobody came in direct confrontation with Putin. Even Chancellor Scholz, who's lost power right now, was on call with Putin. The diplomatic efforts were on. Nothing was changing. So that makes a big impact on a leader who wants to transgress into another country, Jay, when they see no support.
Yeah, what it really goes a step further than his invasion of a neighbor, his violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine. And what he's doing, and I think what he will continue, we both think what he will continue to do is invade his neighbors by these hybrid techniques and try to take them over, make them sympathetic to his initiatives. And so it's just another attack on sovereignty, and it is very, very chilling to see these great countries of the past be undermined this way. Watch what happens. There's a snap election in Germany in February, where Olaf Scholz, is out. He lost a vote of confidence, and Alternative for Germany is complaining they want a bigger piece of it. So, all of those things considered, I think we, as I said before, this is only beginning. And in fact, if he has his way, whatever deal Trump makes with him on dividing Ukraine is not permanent.
No.
He'll continue. He'll have a long plan to get the rest of Ukraine. He likes Ukraine. He wants Ukraine. Let me ask you this, Roopmati. This is, he took some hits in the Syrian affair 2 weeks ago. He was humiliated. Everybody said that. The press was loaded with the word humiliation. He lost his military base there, or bases. He lost a fair amount of equipment, and he lost face. He had to withdraw back to Russia. And he took Assad in with him. Assad had, currency of, gee whiz, I think billions of dollars. And I expect there's a transaction involved. Putin is not without the kind of Trumpian transactional approach where he says, oh, welcome to Moscow. It'll cost you a fair amount of that currency, maybe billions, who knows? It's not just that he's offering Assad sanctuary. He's making a deal with him. He's going to use Assad in furtherance of his larger plan. But for the moment, he's been humiliated. What humiliation, what effect does that humiliation have on what we have been talking about? That is his attempt to undermine Western Europe and the U.S. He can't afford to have that happen too often. And the question I put to you is, what effect does this affair in Syria, where he lost face, have on what we've been talking about?
Jay, Assad, when he escaped, none of his people knew that he was going to flee the country. Even his secretary was asked to report for a meeting about a couple of hours later, but he fled the country. And with Moscow, this deal that you talk of, for sure, he's gotten into this huge dealing with Putin for his escape. And Jay, Putin lost face in Syria because it was so quick and unexpected. He never expected rebels to take over Syria, Jay. And that's where Putin always loses. He underestimates the power of this unorganized sector that happens. Even in Afghanistan, when he lost to these tribal warlords. Right now also he lost to these rebels funded by Turkey, whatever, doesn't matter because he lost. The end result of the war was that he lost control of Syria. Now, and with the loss of Syria, he lost his gateway to the Middle East. So that hurt him the most, where he could control Middle Eastern politics through Syria, have access to Israel, have an access to so many Middle East resources through Syria. So Jay, right now Putin let it go because he's not good fighting on many fronts. He is just concentrating on the Ukraine front, and um, his annexation doesn't stop. Like you said, it was Crimea the last time, now Ukraine. And he wants to leave Ukraine in such a deteriorated state that it is not possible to join NATO like it was before. Because, like we mentioned always, like you've always said, Jay, the cost of reconstruction of Ukraine is going to run into millions and billions of dollars. So, to have a reconstructed Ukraine or to have it join NATO will be like the surviving point, and it will push back Ukraine's desires to be a formidable player in international politics. So Putin knows all these points.
His success for the next 4 years, and maybe longer, who knows, is going to be based on Trump, because Trump gives him more legitimacy than he would otherwise have, especially in Europe, with NATO and the EU and so forth, and the United Nations. But, one day Trump won't be in office, or
Mm.
Putin won't be in office. There's nothing so certain as change, and the leadership will be different. Of course, we can't anticipate exactly how that would work. And one of the other issues that I'd like to fold into this question to you is, in fact, he is becoming more autocratic and depriving the Russian people of greater rights. He is writing laws that make it even more difficult for them to enjoy freedom of expression. And they must feel it. They must feel the loss of all those troops. They must wonder whether his state TV is telling them the truth. And they may remember a time when there was a greater openness in Russia. My question to you is, these changes, including the possibility of a change inside Russia, where he can't retain control for one reason or another, how do they affect his effort to undermine Western Europe in favor of his uh, his plan to become the hegemon?
Jay, Putin is his strategic policy has always been to shield his domestic population from what he is doing. You don't have such a disgruntled population due to the Ukraine war. Nothing came inside Russia as much as it came. The warfare was inside Ukraine. Nothing of that sort happened into Russia. So the Russian um, population always has felt protected by Putin. For them, it is like Putin has not allowed this to happen. We to be in a war zone. So that kind of domestic mind play, Jay, is very, very prevalent in these autocratic leaders that they have. They make first the domestic population feel that they are the ones who are the protectors and the benevolent leaders that they have, and they should be grateful for them. That is the kind of mindset that the media, that the propaganda promotes, Jay. So, besides the domestic population, when you see that how Putin behaves in these European countries, Jay, you see that they have always spread this narrative that Russia has been influenced by Western provocation to enter Ukraine. Russia never wanted to enter. Russia is just the supplier of oil and gas to Europe. And despite the war in Ukraine, Russia has not stopped the oil and gas from being supplied. So you have this kind of image of Russia that is created, which is not a monster, when in fact it is attacking a sovereign country. Big
Actually,
mismatch.
many sovereign countries.
Yes.
These things that it is doing to Western Europe are also attacks on sovereignty. One of the news stories that piqued my interest recently was that, in fact, China had spies in Europe. And I
Mm.
wonder your thoughts about, whether China is supporting him, whether China is undermining Europe in any way, in either legislatively, politically, or otherwise. Economically, we know they're competing with Germany and other manufacturing companies and other manufacturing countries in Europe. But where's China on this? Are they supporting him, or are they just sitting and waiting to see what happens with him?
China is a big supporter of Russia, Jay. They are hand in gloves, and uh, um, what else? And together, they're that close, Jay. So cohesive. Uh, so China is taking advantage of this entire situation, like you have mentioned, Jay. They're exporting to Europe rather than Europe being the exporter themselves. China is just moving at breakneck speed under the guise of any war, anything. They have just one goal, that is to make themselves the manufacturing hub as well as the one of the largest markets. So they have an advantage with Putin being the supplier of oil gas as well as one strong ally. So China is very keeping itself very secure. And Jay, they have this partnership irrespective of the war in Ukraine. And one more thing that is there, Jay, when Russia has annexed, trying to invade Ukraine, see the perception, the global perception is, oh, Ukraine was a part of Russia, so they're taking what is theirs. Imagine if this had happened between France and Germany, if they had tried to attack. You would say, France attacking Germany. Oh, that's not right, they're doing this. But because Ukraine was a part of Russia, they're just taking what is theirs. That is the general perception. So let them do their own. It's an internal affair. You never count Ukraine into a self-sustaining country, and they have left them to fight the war without any meddling.
That will undermine their interests for sure, for not helping Ukraine the way they should have been helping Ukraine for the
Absolutely.
past couple of years. Well, here we are, and 2024 is winding down, Roopmati. We've done some really valuable discussions over the course of 2024, and we're heading into 2025 and Trump's ascendancy on Inauguration Day, whatever that's worth. There will be changes and disruptions. And in many ways, there'll be declines. And I personally suspect the US is going to decline at a rapid rate once he takes office, but that's just me. I would like your thoughts, if you don't mind, about the new year and what it will bring.
I hope it brings a lot of prosperity and peace and happiness, Jay. And that's what we all wish for all the time. And it brings a good government globally, like you always call it, that there should be a world government which governs and which rules with um, with implementation rather than just talk. There should have been a coalition of world governments which came in to stop the Russian invasion, which came in to stop the Hamas terrorist attack. All these things need to be implemented in time to save lives, to bring about peace, and to bring about resolutions to uh, problems of the world that can be solved but are kept pending just for interests of s- strategic partners being fulfilled, Jay. So that's the thing, Jay.
Okay, Roopmati, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for this show and all our shows in 2024. It's been a great contribution to the public conversation. I'm your host, Jay Fidell, here at Global Connections. Thanks to our viewers for watching. Aloha.
Aloha, Jay. Super wishes for you, Jay.